Joining us today is Eric Fox, Chief Economist at Veros. Eric and I are delighted to welcome the dynamic duo of Karen and Kari Picarello to our webcast today. This mother-daughter team brings a unique perspective and combined experience of 52 years to the Scottsdale and Phoenix metro real estate market. With a passion for helping buyers and sellers move, they have built a reputation for exceptional service and market expertise. We're going to find out what buyers and sellers can expect from the changes required in the National Association of Realtors settlement. Karen and Kari, can you tell our viewers a little bit about the NAR settlement? Because I don't think everybody clearly understands what that is.
Of course, and there's a lot of different headlines that you'll see all over the place about prices changing and commissions going away and all kinds of things. But here's what it's really about. There's two changes that are going to happen that will affect buyers and sellers. And the first thing is that anytime a buyer wants to go see a house with an agent, with some exceptions, they'll have to sign an agreement that they have an agent. And it could just be for one day, it could be for one house, but they'll have to have something that they sign. And the second change is the way that the buyer agents get paid. The way that we traditionally did it was in the MLS, the state database with all the listings. There's an offering of compensation that's listed there. That's going away. That's no longer allowed to be listed in that MLS. So those are the two changes. Everything else is kind of a detail from that or something related to that. But those are really the two changes, which I don't think a buyer or a seller is really going to notice too much because of the way that we already had their paperwork set up. It already kind of was a buyer responsibility to pay the agent, but it was not written very clearly. So the new forms actually make it a little bit clearer. Mm-hmm. And we like it because it's going to give us more opportunity to talk with the buyers and sellers. So everybody is on the same page and everyone knows exactly what everyone's getting paid.
So will the NAR settlement affect the way you conduct business?
Well, our forms are a little bit different. There's quite a few forms that they've revised to change the verbiage, to talk about specific buyer. They're decoupling the buyer compensation and the seller compensation. So the new forms kind of indicate that. As far as how we do business, we've been using a buyer broker form for many, many years. So that won't change. And so as far as the way we conduct business, but a lot of agents haven't ever used a form like that. So it will change it a lot for some agents. And then buyers who maybe have bought 5 or 6 homes before might not be even used to seeing a buyer agreement. Mm. And so, yes, there's some education on both the agent side and the client side. So, yeah, that part will change.
Yes, it'll also change the way that we write our contracts because before this lawsuit and before the settlement, we were not allowed to have any sort of compensation be part of the contract, contingent on the contract, any of that. But with these new changes, now buyer agent compensation can be part of the contract. And so that creates a third-party beneficiary situation for the agent. So now the agent could potentially hold up a closing if they're not going to get paid. So it's a little bit tricky and it's going to require some navigation, but it's not going to be a huge world-shattering difference because what typically happens is the buyer will ask the seller to pay the agent through the buyer's closing costs. So the seller can credit the buyer and then the buyer can direct those funds to be paid to their agent. And we would generally tell our sellers to want to do this because that helps get your house sold. You want to attract bees to honey, right? So you want to get the people in your house, as many people as possible. So some agents are going to offer an amount, and it might be on like their website. It might be just making a phone call where they could potentially, or text. It could be a phone. They could be giving a different rate to every agent that shows that house that day. And then other agents aren't going to share anything. And they're going to say, well, write me the offer and put in what you expect to be compensated in with the offer. And then you're negotiating the whole thing. So I think we're going to see a lot of that.
And I think that's a good way to do it. I like that new change. Yeah,
do you see differences in how a buyer's agent and a seller's agent's commissions are going to be impacted? For example, would you see one of them impacted less and maybe another one could be highly variable depending on if it was a seller's market versus a buyer's market, for example?
That could be the case for both sides, actually. And they are negotiable, but most agents that I know, of course, this is from conferences that I go to, but most agents that I know have a pretty set amount that they charge for their services. But different agents might charge different amounts. So that will be interesting to see what comes up, because we already see one company that has, $9.99 or something to list a house. And I don't know the details of it, but we might see some new ideas on how people are compensated. I think the listing agents may have a little bit more control here than the buying agents. And now we have a new category that we hardly ever heard of, was an unrepresented buyer. So that's a buyer that's maybe bought a lot of houses, or they're internet savvy and think they don't need an agent to help them. They'll go directly to the listing agent. And in our new forms, there's how much extra are you as a seller willing to pay if that buyer is unrepresented? Because in reality, we need to use our forms. There'll be certain things that the listing agent has to do that they wouldn't have to if they were working with a buyer that had representation.
Very interesting. Do you see any way that the changes and the settlement that are coming about are going to impact the value of homes in the Phoenix Scottsdale area?
I don't think so.
No, I haven't heard anybody that expects that, except for some of those people online.
Sure.
Sure. But in my experience in talking to agents across the country, they don't see where sellers are going to lower their prices just because they may or may not have to pay a full buyer's commission.
Yeah, they don't want to lower their home values because the way the agents get paid changed. So a buyer might try to make an offer that way, but a seller is not likely to say, oh yeah, I guess the value of my home went down.
The sellers now, with the way that we're doing it in our market, are going to see the whole picture right up front. So, and if there's multiple offers for any reason, they're going to look at their bottom line, which is what we've tried to get them to do for a long time, rather than focus on how much they're paying either agent, but what is their net. And so now it's going to be much more clear what their net will be for each offer.
Very, very interesting. One final question. So would you see in a strong seller's market, let's say, would you almost see buyer's agent commission being waived in a really strong offer as kind of, like waiving an appraisal in a strong seller's market? Would you see things like that occurring to entice the seller to accept an offer?
It depends upon the buyer's ability. First-time home buyers usually don't have enough money on the side to pay a full commission or compensation to the buyer's agent. So that's part of the acceptance. If the seller doesn't want to pay anything because it's a seller's market, and if they have an offer that either is unrepresented or not asking for that compensation, then they may lose out. But they might have lost out anyway in a hot seller's market, even if just because they have a loan. So I don't see that being a big difference, but it could be that buyers and sellers commissions could be challenged.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And yeah, I think if the seller refused to pay a compensation for a represented buyer, then it would fall to the buyer. And there would already be that written agreement that has to be in place before the buyer's even seeing the house. So the buyer would know upfront that they're responsible for this amount, and it just could be offset by whatever the seller's willing to do. And we like that because the money can come out of the seller's proceeds of the sale. Whereas if the buyer pays it, the buyer has to come up with the cash out of pocket and bring it to closing. So it's a big difference.
Thank you, Kari and Karen, for your wonderful insights. It was a pleasure speaking to both of you.
Sure. And if you have any other questions, Eric, just send me more questions.
I will. Thank you.
It was very interesting, and really, I'm glad you kind of were willing to speak a little bit on the settlement, because I think there's so much misinformation out there.
A lot.
Some people don't understand any of it, and so it's hard to really get good, clear, reliable, knowledgeable information. So I think this is going to be really widely received from our viewers. So we really look forward to getting this out.
Great.
Great.
Thank you so
Great.
much.
Yeah. Thanks for the
Thank you.
invite.